Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Tonight, we'll be learning about the poem Raven by Sir Edgar Allan Poe. I will now be presenting the slides.
Okay. The poem is entitled The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Next next slide, please. Yeah. Next one. So, before we proceed to the annotating the poem, let us know the information about the narrator of the poem, Edgar Allan Poe. He was born on January 19, 1809 at Boston, Massachusetts, US. His spouse is Virginia Eliza Clem Poe. Poe was an American writer, poet, editor, and literary critic. Poe is best known for his poetry and short stories, particularly his tales of mystery and the macabre. He is widely regarded as a center figure of Romanticism in the United States and of American literature as a whole, and was one of the country's earliest practitioners of the short story. And also, he died on October 7, 1849, age 40, at Baltimore, Maryland, US. So, what is the rhyme scheme of the poem? So, Poe wrote The Raven as a ballad with 18 six-line stanzas. It employs trochaic octameter, a dramatic form of meter, to emphasize its heavy use of rhyme. The whole poem follows the ABC BBB rhyme scheme, and AAB CC CB BB for internal rhyme patterns. So what do we mean by internal rhyme patterns? Okay, internal rhyme patterns is a word inside a line rhymes with another word on the same line. The example of internal rhymes are the use of word dreary and weary in the same line. And the line is once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary. Another example is distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December. The use of lore, door and again door at the end of the second, fourth and fifth lines is end rhyme pattern. Next please. Deep into the darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. Next slide. So the setting. The poem is set in the chambers of a young male student who has apparently lost his lover fairly recently. It was Lenore. It is midnight on a stormy night in December. It is midnight on a dreary, bleak December night. So in the setting, it is described as a cold, dreary, black December night at the home of the narrator. The fire is dying and the narrator is looking over books. The settings makes one immediately feel the cold, lonely, and despairing tone of the poem. It is dark, which means midnight, and sad, dreary, and this sets the mood of the poem. Next. So the symbolisms, we have Lenore. So Lenore is thought to be a deceased wife of the narrator. She may represent idealized love, beauty, truth, or hope in a better world. She is rare and radiant. We are told several times an angelic description, perhaps symbolic of heaven. Lenore may symbolize truth. The narrator cannot help but think of her, and her ubiquitous yet elusive nature haunts the narrative. Next. Next, please. Next slide. Okay, for number 2, symbolism, we have the raven. The ebony bird stands as the embodiment of grief caused by loneliness and separation. He stands as a symbol of the loss of the narrator whose heart yearns for his beloved Lenore. The raven represents evil and death. The raven is also a symbol of the narrator's grief as well as the wisdom that the narrator gains through their exchange. Next slide. Okay, we have night's Plutonian shore darkness. It represents the danger lurking throughout the verse. The scary images descend from the ethereal gloom brought through the unknown power of the midnight hour. The shadows, the bleakness, the eeriness all epitomize the setting and atmosphere within the poem. So, the night's Plutonian shore darkness, it is a Plutonian is reference to Pluto, the god of the underworld, the abode of the dead in the Greek mythology. And the Plutonian shore means it is a shore of the river Styx. It is a river which formed the boundary between earth and underworld. Next, please. Last, Nepenthe, the narrator desperately searches for something that will remove his pain and suffering. This is symbolized by Nepenthe, an ancient drug used to help one relieve sorrows. So Nepenthe is a potion used by the ancient to induce forgetfulness of pain and sorrow. Next, please. The bust of Pallas. Pallas Athena was the Greek goddess of wisdom. It is upon this wisdom that the raven settles, adding credence, at least according to the narrator, to its utterances. So the meaning of bust of Pallas in the narrator's chamber represents his interest in learning and scholarship. It also represents rationality in general and his own rational same mind. Next slide. Next reporter.
Okay, thank you, Miss Rosemary. And now let's proceed to the figurative language that used in the poem The Raven. So in the poem, the raven is personified as a messenger of death. So in this poem, the raven is royally personified. So almost like a noble guest who has entered into the presence of the sad young victim, perhaps as a messenger of death or harbinger of death. The narrator is captivated by its entrance into the room and terms it stately. And the way it perches itself looks like an act of dignified nobility, lord or lady. So in fact, the raven is just a bird and it flies into the room. It knows nothing of pretending itself to be like royalty. So the narrator goes on to tell how the raven spoke, not with a bird-like call, but human-like one word, with great lucidity and emotion. So as if his soul in that one word hid it out for. So all this description of the raven's manner of speaking, activeness and emotion, all of these are examples of personification. Next slide, please. So next are the answerable questions. So first is, what does Lenore represent in the raven? So it was discussed earlier with the symbolisms. Next is what is the mood of the raven poem? Next, what is he hoping the raven can tell him. So those three questions that was answerable in the poem. Next, please. Okay, next reporter.
Okay, now let's discuss the insights of our group about the poem The Raven. Edgar, Edgar Allan Poe's poetry has long been shrouded in an aura of mystery, sublimity, and horror. The Raven is wildly imaginative and disquietingly mournful, and its insistent rhymes and rhythms are still engraved in the minds of readers around the world. Okay, we all know that all of Edgar Allan Poe's poetry was covered with mystery and horror, and all of his poetry is such a superb works. And one of these is The Raven. Okay, next slide, please. The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe is a poem about losing a loved one and death. The poem provides insight into the feelings of a man who recently lost his love, and he attempts to distract himself from the sadness that he is facing through unreasonable thinking and actions. His coping methods prove to be unhelpful because a single visitor, the Raven, appears at his chamber and puts an end to his solitude. Okay, The Raven is written with such a heavy feelings as it is about losing a loved one and death. It is such a mournful poem. This poem gives insight about how sad and difficult to lost a loved ones. Coping with loneliness is not easy. Next slide, please. Okay. Throughout the poem, Edgar Allan Poe incorporates repetition, symbolism, and imagery to implement the theme. The loss of a loved one causes emotional distress and cannot be overcome through sensible thinking. Okay, this poem of Edgar Allan Poe um, incorporates repetition, symbolism, and imagery. And losing someone, it means that losing someone you love can cause mystery or misery and cannot easily be overcome by simple thinking um, of it. Okay, next. Okay, let's proceed to the poem analysis. The Raven personifies the feeling of intense grief and loss, while other symbols throughout the poem reinforce a melodramatic mood that emphasizes the main character's grief and loss. This poem explores the world of emotional wars that individuals face in all walks of life, specifically the fight one can never ignore, the fight of control over the emotions of grief and loss. These battles are not physical, but leave scaring, bruising just as if they were. Poe has produced a wonderful piece of work that resonates with feelings and experiences of every reader that comes across this poem. Okay. So this poem shows the intense feeling of grief and loss and melodramatic mood. So the framing of the poem as a memory emphasizes how the events of the poem continue to haunt the speaker. Next slide, please. Okay, the conclusion. The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe is a dark and mysterious poem in which the speaker converses with a raven and wars over the knocking at his door. Throughout the poem, the poet uses repetition to emphasize the mysterious knocking occurring in the speaker's home in the middle of the cold December evening. Okay, so our our conclusion about it is the knocking on his door or on the speaker doors is the memories that he him and her wife is. Um, the message of this poem is you must let go. You cannot hold on to everything you love forever, and it will only bring you pain and suffering. Next slide. So, like what I've said earlier, so next is okay. No one is there but a raven does fly into his room. It speaks to him using only the word nevermore. So the nevermore word means that we can never hold on to what we have or who we love. Letting go, moving on, and acceptance is very important for you to feel better. Next. Okay. This is its this is its response to everything the speaker asked of it. Finally, the speaker decided that angels have caused the air to fill in density and wonders if they are there to relieve him of his pain. The third bird answers nevermore, and it appears the speaker is going to live forever in the shadow of the bust of Pallias above his door. Okay, that is what I've said earlier. Next. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you so much, Miss Naive, and that is it for us. That was The Raven by Sir Edgar Allan Poe, and we thank you again for your time in joining us today on our mini webinar for the poem analysis. And we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you.